So now when we look at this table for a nonlinear function, I can see that again I have some of my values not written in for future terms and also for my previous term. So to try and determine a pattern, if there is one of any sort, remember there's not going to be a common difference. So I'm not looking for adding or subtracting, I'm looking for something else. I'm going to start by looking at 6. So when I look at the numbers 6 to 18, I'm trying to think in my brain, okay, so I'm not going to worry about adding or subtracting to get to 18, but what else do I know about 6 and 18? And when I think about that a little bit more deeply, I determine that, well, if I multiply 6 by 3, I end up at 18. So 6 times 3 is 18. So then I need to make sure and double check if that's true from 18 to 54. And sure enough, 18 times 3 gets me to 54. And 54 times 3 gets me to 162. And 162 times 3 gets me to 486. And 486 times 3 gets me to 1,458. So that was using a multiplying by 3 pattern to move me forward. So to move me backwards then, I need to think of what's the opposite of multiplying by 3. Well, the opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. So then to double check moving forward, sure enough, 2 times 3 gets me to 6. This is all the while my x values or my inputs are still going up by +1 each time. So now instead of having an adding or subtracting problem or pattern, I have a multiplying pattern. So whenever I have a multiplying pattern where I'm multiplying by the same number every time, that's what's called having a common ratio. So because this table has a common ratio, it is a nonlinear function. Therefore, when I look at the graphs of nonlinear functions, these are graphs where there's just simply not a straight line. So one graph, for an example, could be a V shape. And we've explored these shapes a little bit in Unit 1, but we haven't really gotten a term or a name for them, and that's to come in the future. But these, although they may look linear if you're only looking at one part of the graph, are not linear functions because they form a V. Another form of a nonlinear function is a curved line. So let's say I have a curved line that starts in the upper left and starts to decrease or decline and curve towards the right. Again, that line is not straight, therefore it's nonlinear. A third type of graph would be a graph that is a U shape. And I know we've seen plenty of these examples in Unit 1, and we'll continue to explore what these U shapes or upside down U shapes are called and how we work with them. And then last but not least, a nonlinear graph would be any type of scatter plot. So these graphs are 4 examples of nonlinear functions because they are not straight lines. Finally, for equations then, nonlinear equations are those that have exponents that are higher than 1, or there's other features that are going on. So for example, if I had an equation y equals 3x squared, this is nonlinear because the x variable has an exponent of 2, which is higher than 1. So this is going to make, or this exponent of 2 is going to make my graph do some sort of curving. Another example of an equation is if I have the absolute value sign in my equation. So y equals the absolute value of x plus 5. That absolute value symbol affects the graph some way in that it will not cause a straight line. So because this absolute value symbol is there, this is a nonlinear function. And then another example of a nonlinear function is if I have x in the variable place. So here I have y equals 2 to the x exponent. Anytime x is in the exponent, that will also form a nonlinear graph. Again, these are items or characteristics or concepts that we will be covering and talking about in the future. And I'll be giving you names and more obviously in-depth information about them. But I need you to start making these connections now about when you look at these equations, why or what makes them nonlinear. And that's why I wanted to chat with you about that in this section. So that ends our summary notes episode 1 for unit 2. So then make sure after you have all of your information filled out, you take pictures of these summary notes, you upload them to the assignment and press submit, so then you can move on and get access to the next lesson.